The students didn't cheer when the ship's destination was announced. Instead, silence filled the classroom. Alien students from across the galaxy, all from different species and star systems, looked at each other with nervous eyes and flickering antennae. No one had expected this. The Intergalactic History Institute had organized a rare field trip for their top students, a visit to a forbidden world. A world most of them had only heard about in warnings, documentaries, and legends. Earth. The name alone was enough to make many of them uncomfortable. It was one of the few planets marked as a death world, a classification given to places where survival was nearly impossible, where nature itself seemed to fight anything that walked its surface. For years, the planet had been closed off. Humanity, once its dominant species, had mysteriously disappeared over a century ago. No one knew exactly why. The humans left behind no farewell message, no warning, only silence. The planet remained untouched since then, surrounded by satellites and orbital beacons that only said one thing in every known language: enter at your own risk. Rill, a young insectoid with 6 thin legs and curious green eyes, sat in the corner of the ship's observation deck, watching the blue-green planet slowly grow larger in the viewing glass. It looked peaceful from up here. Beautiful, even. The ocean sparkled under the light of the nearby star. Thick forests covered the land. Snow still capped the mountains, but something about it felt wrong. Too quiet, too perfect. He leaned forward and asked the guide robot, "Why does it called a death world if it looks so calm?" The robot didn't look away from its controls. Because calm, it said, can be the deepest kind of danger. That didn't help Rill's nerves. As the ship entered the atmosphere, turbulence shook the cabin slightly. Students tightened the seals of their protective suits. The instructors gave final warnings. Do not remove your helmets. Do not touch any local life forms. Stay with the group at all times. Earth's ecosystem is unpredictable and self-defending. The ship landed in the remains of a human city, overgrown by nature. Tall buildings once made of glass and steel now stood like crumbling towers wrapped in vines. Trees had broken through roads. Vehicles were half swallowed by roots and moss. Strange birds watched from the rooftops. The wind carried distant howls, not animal-like, but not mechanical either. Rill stepped out slowly, his small legs making soft clicks against the cracked pavement. The air was thick with moisture and silence. Even the city's ruins seemed to be holding their breath. Their guide, an ancient robot historian named Vox 19, activated a holographic map and led the group into what had once been a university. Inside, the walls were covered with murals, writings, and diagrams showing the story of Earth's past. Vox explained how humanity had risen from a simple species to a galactic power, but it wasn't technology that made them powerful. It was their ability to survive on a planet that constantly pushed them to their limits. Earth had volcanoes, earthquakes, storms, predators, diseases, and extreme temperatures. And yet, humans had endured, adapted, grown. Vox showed the class a hologram of early humans walking barefoot across frozen tundras and scorching deserts. They never had the strongest bodies, the robot said, but they had something better: willpower. As the group explored deeper into the ruined city, the silence became heavier. The students didn't speak much. Their suit sensors picked up strange energy readings, power sources that had no business still working after 100 years. Lights flickered in the distance. An old screen lit up on its own and played an emergency broadcast. A human face appeared, tired but calm. "If you're seeing this," the message said, "we've already left. Not because we lost. Not because we were destroyed. But because we changed. This planet, it's still ours, in a way. It remembers us. And maybe it remembers too well." The screen turned off. No one said anything for a moment. One of the students, a plant-like being named Elor, whispered, "Did the planet miss them?" Rill didn't know what to think. The more they walked, the more it felt like the planet wasn't empty. It felt like it was watching them, listening. The group arrived at an open plaza where statues of human explorers, scientists, and thinkers stood tall, their faces worn by time but still proud. The instructors gave them a break. Rill wandered a little toward the edge of the plaza and noticed something odd. A flower, bright red with glowing tips, growing right in the middle of a cracked floor. It swayed slightly, even though there was no wind. Curious, he reached out, forgetting the warning for just a second. As his gloved hand touched the edge of the flower, it instantly closed. The ground beneath it shifted. A low hum started. The flower had triggered something. Suddenly, ancient drones shot out of a nearby wall, scanning the group with blinking red lights. The instructors shouted for everyone to remain still. Vox raised its hand and sent out a code signal, shutting the drones down. They froze mid-air and slowly returned to their hiding places. The hum faded. The plaza fell silent again. Vox turned to the group, its voice lower than before. "You must be more careful. Earth is not sleeping. It is remembering." Rill backed away slowly, his heart pounding. He didn't know what he had just awakened, but he knew now the warnings were real. Back in the ship that night, the students sat quietly. No one made jokes or complained anymore. Something had changed. They were beginning to understand what the title Death World truly meant. It wasn't just about danger or survival. It was about history, memory, and the presence of something deeper, something the planet itself might still carry. Earth wasn't just a place that used to be dangerous. It was a place that had become something more. A living memory, a guardian of secrets, a silent challenge to those who dared to step on its soil without respect. Rill stared out the window again, looking at the glowing forests under the night sky. He thought about the message. We didn't leave because we lost. We left because we changed. That line kept echoing in his mind. What did it really mean? Why did they leave a world they had mastered? What had they become? And most importantly, were they truly gone? The night passed slowly on the orbiting ship, but none of the students slept peacefully. Even in the safety of reinforced walls and artificial air, Earth had left a strange feeling inside each of them, like the weight of a heavy memory pressing on their minds. Rill lay awake, watching the monitors replay the emergency message over and over again, each word sounding more mysterious the longer he listened. We didn't leave because we lost. We left because we changed. That sentence didn't sit well with him. It wasn't just a farewell. It felt like a warning wrapped inside a secret. The instructors were silent too, more cautious than before. Even Vox 19, the historian robot who usually spoke with pride and confidence, seemed unsettled. Early in the morning, they prepared to return to the surface, this time heading toward a structure that had caught everyone's attention from the scans, a massive underground facility buried beneath the mountains, shielded with layers of old tech still producing low-energy signals. It had no name, no record in any database, and even Vox 19 admitted it had never been documented. That made it even more tempting. As the transport craft descended through mist and clouds, the students gazed at the landscape. Forests so thick they looked like walls, rivers twisting through ruined highways, and the distant ruins of cities swallowed by time. When they landed at the mountain's base, they found a door carved into the stone, half buried under rubble and vines. It took 2 hours for the robotic tools to clear the path and crack open the ancient seal. The moment the door opened, a cold breeze rushed out, not wind, but air that had been trapped inside for possibly hundreds of years. It smelled metallic, mixed with something strange, something burnt. Inside was complete darkness. The lights from their suits barely touched the walls. The group stepped carefully through long corridors lined with old panels, rusted pipes, and faded signs written in English. Signs that said things like biocontainment sector, security clearance required, and emergency lockdown. Protocol read. Nobody spoke loudly. They all felt it now, the weight of silence pressing down harder than before. Rill's scanner picked up strange signals, faint echoes that didn't match any known frequencies. Sometimes, the signals almost sounded like breathing. Far inside the mountain, they found a chamber shaped like a giant dome. At the center stood a machine, tall, circular, and covered with thick cables and shattered screens. Its surface was scorched and cracked, like something had exploded inside it. Vox approached the machine, his voice low. "This is impossible. This is human technology, yes, but far more advanced than anything they were known to have. This doesn't belong to their final days. It looks like something they were just beginning to build before they vanished." The students gathered around, staring at the machine with unease. It looked like a fusion reactor mixed with something biological. Rill noticed that it pulsed, ever so slightly, as if something inside still lived. Elor, the plant-like student, reached out to touch one of the cables, but Vox shouted, "Don't. We don't know what it was made for." Before Elor could respond, a deep, low sound vibrated through the floor, like a heartbeat. The lights flickered. The doors behind them sealed shut. And from the walls, holographic images began to appear, not recorded messages, but memories. Real, moving scenes from the past, as if the mountain itself remembered. They saw humans working in the lab, their faces serious, some shouting, others running. Alarms blared. One voice echoed louder than the rest. A human scientist, eyes wide with fear, said, "We opened something we shouldn't have. This machine, it's connected to something we don't understand. It doesn't run on power. It runs on thought, on memory, on will." The images shifted. Another scene showed the same lab in chaos, workers collapsing, lights failing, and the same machine glowing brighter and brighter until everything vanished in a white flash. Then silence. The holograms faded, the lights returned, and the machine at the center powered on by itself. The students backed away, terrified, but the instructors held them in place. Vox stepped forward, scanning the energy coming from the machine. "It's not active in a dangerous way," he said, "but it's aware of us. It knows we're here." That statement sent chills through the group. A machine that could think and remember. And worse, one built by humans and then abandoned. Rill couldn't help but ask, why would they leave something like this behind? Why didn't they destroy it if it was dangerous? Vox turned slowly, his metallic face unreadable. Perhaps they couldn't, or perhaps they chose not to. They spent hours studying the machine, trying to understand its purpose, but every answer only led to more questions. The deeper they explored the facility, the more evidence they found of strange experiments, devices that could record emotions, implants designed to amplify instinct, even rooms that reacted to the presence of human DNA by changing temperature or color. It was as if humans had been trying to build something greater than themselves, something that lived between the physical and the mental, between the machine and the soul. But why? What had they been preparing for? Rill came across a terminal still glowing faintly, and to his surprise, it accepted his command. A video file appeared, grainy, old, but functional. A human woman stared into the camera, her voice calm but heavy. "To whoever finds this, know that we didn't run. We didn't die. We evolved. We built this world not to survive it, but to become part of it. The Earth remembers because we made it remember. Not with wires and circuits, but with feeling, thought, and intention. The machine you found was our last test, a doorway, not into space, but into something bigger. We stepped through it. We became something more. Not gone. Just changed." The video ended. Everyone stood frozen. No one knew what to say. The machine pulsed again, and this time, Rill felt something strange in his head. Not a sound, not a word, but a feeling. Like someone was asking a question, or waiting for one. He didn't tell anyone. Not yet. They returned to the ship in silence, carrying scans, recordings, and 1,000 more mysteries than before. Earth had spoken, not with words, but with memories that refused to die. And now the students understood one thing clearly. This world wasn't abandoned. It was transformed. And maybe, just maybe, the humans weren't gone at all. They had left behind their echoes. And the echoes were still calling. The silence on the orbiting ship was no longer peaceful. It was filled with questions no one dared to ask out loud. The students sat in the observation room, staring at Earth through reinforced glass, its surface turning slowly under a layer of thick clouds and forgotten history. Rill couldn't stop thinking about the strange message from the human woman, the pulsing machine, and that unexplainable feeling inside his mind. A feeling like someone was still watching. He hadn't told the others, not even Vox 19, but every time he closed his eyes, he felt the presence again, like an unseen eye hidden somewhere in the planet's shadows. When the instructors finally spoke, their tone was calm but heavy. They had decided to send a probe deeper into Earth's crust, near the core where older energy signatures had been found. Patterns that matched the underground machine, but far older, buried so deep that no species had ever gone that far. The students watched as the probe descended from orbit, passing through layers of atmosphere and artificial storms until it disappeared beneath the surface, cutting through stone, heat, and time itself. Hours passed, then days with no response. Then, without warning, the ship's systems began to flicker. Lights dimmed, screens froze, gravity shifted. An alert rang through the corridors, not from the ship's sensors, but from something external, something invisible, sending signals the ship couldn't decode. Vox 19 and the instructors rushed to the command deck, while the students followed behind, their nerves on edge. The main screen showed a symbol, just one, burned into the signal like a brand. It wasn't from any known language. It was simple, sharp, and terrifying. A circle broken in half by a single vertical line. Vox stared at it in silence before speaking. It's a warning, not a message, not communication. This is something ancient. It's meant to tell us to stop. But before they could process the meaning, the feed from the probe returned for just a second. One single frame, one single image, and it shook everyone to their core. It showed a vast cavern, glowing with a strange light, and something inside it. Massive, still, shaped like a human figure, but built from stone, metal, and bone, as if it had been buried for eons and was never meant to wake. Around it, carved into the walls in perfect spirals, were words in English. U-D-E-R-E-N-D-K-I-N-V-I-T-E-D. Then the feed cut, the probe destroyed, and the ship itself shook, as if something had reached out from Earth and grabbed it. The students screamed as artificial gravity collapsed for a second, sending tools and bodies floating through the air. Alarms blared. Emergency lights flashed. It took nearly an hour to stabilize the systems, and when everything returned to normal, the instructors ordered a full lockdown. The ship was not allowed to re-enter Earth's atmosphere, not without clearance, not without answers. Vox 19 gathered the students and finally told them the truth. Earth had always been considered a death world, not just because of its hostile wildlife, climate, or atmosphere, but because of something else. Something no record had ever been allowed to explain. Long ago, before most species even developed spaceflight, a few early explorers reached Earth and vanished. Not in war, not in accidents, but in silence. No remains were found, no wreckage, only a strange pulse in space that repeated one thing across frequencies: do not disturb the cradle. For centuries, no one knew what it meant. When humans left Earth, most believed they'd gone extinct, pushed beyond their limits. But a small group of scholars believed something else, that humans had crossed a line in science, one that touched the edge of something greater, something they weren't supposed to touch. Earth, they believed, wasn't just abandoned, it was sealed. And now that seal was reacting to the presence of outsiders. Rill felt a chill crawl through him. The warnings weren't vague anymore. They were direct. You weren't invited. That wasn't just a phrase. It was a threat. But even worse, it hinted at something bigger, someone who was invited. Something still living on Earth, hidden, watching, waiting. That night, strange things began to happen on the ship. Doors opened without reason. Voices echoed in rooms that were empty. Students reported seeing shadows moving across their vision, even in well-lit halls. Vox ran full diagnostics but found nothing wrong. And yet, the ship's memory logs began rewriting themselves. Footage of their first landing was corrupted, replaced with static. Files disappeared. Even the AI assistant, which managed ship functions, began speaking strangely, pausing between sentences like it was confused, or listening to something else. Finally, a decision was made. One last mission, but not to explore, only to return to the original landing site. Rill, Vox, and 2 others volunteered. As they descended again in a smaller craft, the atmosphere was heavy with clouds and tension. The landscape below looked different, darker, older, and as their ship landed, the ground itself trembled like a living creature shifting in its sleep. They stepped out in silence, walking across the soil that now felt more like skin than earth. At the edge of the ruined city, they found something new, an object that hadn't been there before. It was small, black, shaped like a cube, hovering just inches above the ground. Rill reached toward it, but the moment his fingers touched the surface, his vision vanished. For a second, he wasn't on Earth. He was somewhere else. Dark, cold, endless, and in front of him stood a human figure, tall, glowing faintly, with eyes that held stars inside them. The figure didn't speak, but Rill understood the message anyway. It wasn't in words. It was in emotion, in pressure, in memory. It said, "You've seen the warning. You've heard the echoes. Now choose. Leave and forget us, or stay and remember everything. But understand, once you remember, you cannot return." And then it was gone. Rill fell back, gasping, the others rushing to him. The cube had vanished, and in the sky above, lightning cracked in a perfect line across the clouds, straight, unnatural, like someone had drawn it with a ruler. That was the first warning. Clear. Final. Earth was not just dangerous because of what it once was. It was dangerous because of what it had become. A place shaped not just by time or science, but by thought itself, human will, preserved like fire, still burning beneath stone and steel. The group returned to the ship with heavy hearts, their minds haunted by the choice now resting on their shoulders. Forget, or remember. Leave Earth behind, or dig deeper into its mysteries. But one thing was now certain. They were no longer explorers. They were witnesses. And whatever Earth truly was, it had awakened, and it was watching. The silence aboard the ship had changed. It was no longer the silence of fear, but of realization. Every student, every instructor, every AI system on board now knew they had gone too far. Earth was not just a forgotten world. It was something else entirely. Something built on secrets that refused to stay buried. Rill sat in his cabin, staring at the small device that had somehow appeared in his personal locker after their last return to orbit, a small black shard, humming faintly, warm to the touch, and impossible to scan. It didn't show up on any system. It wasn't made of any known material. And yet, when he held it, he could feel a pulse, not mechanical, but alive, like a heartbeat hiding inside stone. Vox 19 had demanded it be destroyed, but Rill refused. He didn't know why, but something deep inside him said it was part of the answer, part of the final puzzle Earth had left behind. The instructors held a secret meeting that night, away from students, discussing the consequences of their exploration. They agreed to send one final team to Earth's surface, not to explore, but to follow the coordinates the shard had silently projected into their systems. The location wasn't random. It led to the very center of Earth's forgotten continent, deep beneath the ruins of what had once been the most advanced human city, now covered in blackened forests and shifting dust. Rill, Vox 19, and two others. Lanara, a linguistic scholar, and Tovak, an engineer, prepared for what would be their last mission. As the shuttle broke through the clouds again, the air around the planet felt different, heavier, as if Earth itself had begun to notice them in ways they couldn't explain. When they landed, the coordinates led them through broken towers and half-sunken streets to a hidden elevator that went deep underground, far below anything the scans had ever revealed. As the elevator descended, the walls around them began to change. First simple stone, then reinforced metal, then something else, something smooth and white, like artificial bone. Lights flickered on as they passed, not electric, but bioluminescent, responding to their presence like Earth's forgotten systems still remembered human touch. At the bottom, they stepped out into a vast chamber, shaped like a dome, perfectly preserved despite thousands of years of abandonment. In the center stood a massive structure, part machine, part sculpture, and somehow part living tissue, shaped like a heart, suspended in the air by invisible forces. It pulsed gently, glowing from within, and around it were floating symbols, words in hundreds of alien languages, but all saying the same thing: do not open unless you remember. Rill stepped forward, and the shard in his hand suddenly rose into the air, drawn toward the heart. Before anyone could stop it, the shard clicked into a slot near the center, and the entire chamber shook. Lights flared. The air grew cold, and then the heart began to speak, not with sound, but with memory. The team stood frozen as images flooded their minds. Memories not their own, voices from thousands of years ago, conversations between humans who had seen something they should never have seen. They learned that Earth had never been abandoned. It had been hidden, sealed off by humans themselves after a discovery that changed everything. Deep within Earth's core, humans had found a source of power that wasn't from this universe, a living energy, capable of shaping thought into matter, bending reality to will. It was not technology. It was something older, something beyond understanding. The first humans who touched it were changed, physically, mentally, spiritually. Some became gods in their own minds. Others vanished, consumed by the power. Fearing what they had become, humanity sealed the energy away, building the heart as a lock and using their final breath as a civilization to hide the truth from the galaxy. Earth was declared dead. The warning was broadcast, and those few who had survived were scattered across space, never allowed to return. The heart of the mystery was not a weapon, not a relic, but the source of humanity's ancient transformation, and perhaps their greatest curse. As the memories faded, the team collapsed, struggling to breathe. Vox 19 stared at the heart, now glowing brighter, its pulses quickening like it was waking up. "We've triggered it," he said quietly. "It knows we're here." Lanara pointed at the symbols. They had changed. Now they read, "You have remembered. Choose wisely." Tovak, overwhelmed, backed away. "We should leave now. Destroy the data. Forget everything." But Rill shook his head. "It's too late. We can't unsee this. We were never supposed to come here, but now we have. We must finish what they started." A heart began to open, not physically, but through layers of reality peeling away like paper. A doorway formed in midair, dark, endless, and silent. Beyond it, they saw stars. And something else. Shapes moving, watching. Beings not made of matter, not of this universe. The source of the power. The reason humans had sealed everything. It wasn't just about what they found. It was about what had found them. Rill stepped forward, drawn toward the doorway. And in that moment, he understood the final truth. The heart was not a prison. It was a beacon. It had been waiting not to be opened, but to be remembered. To test whether those who returned were ready. Ready for what? He didn't know. Enlightenment. Destruction. Evolution. He looked back at Vox and the others, and for a moment, he saw what the ancient humans had seen. Possibility so vast it frightened him. Then he stepped through the doorway. The chamber vanished. The heart stopped pulsing, and the earth fell silent once again. Vox returned to the ship, his mind changed forever. The doorway had closed, and Rill was gone, not dead, but elsewhere. Perhaps part of the mystery now. Perhaps becoming something more. The ship left orbit the next day. No records were uploaded. No reports were filed. Earth returned to the forbidden list, and deep below its surface, in a chamber untouched by time, the heart waited once more for someone brave enough to remember and foolish enough to open it. In the far edges of known space, where forgotten stars whispered secrets to empty voids, a small research vessel named Pathfinder drifted near a dead planet known only by its ancient human codename, E47. Officially, the planet was listed as uninhabitable, its surface scarred by radiation and storms, its history lost in the digital collapse that followed Earth's fall centuries ago. Unofficially, whispers traveled between captains and scholars that E47 was something else entirely. Once home to a forgotten project so dangerous, it was erased from galactic memory. Aboard the Pathfinder, Captain Elric frowned at the signal they had intercepted. A human frequency, encrypted using a dead Terran protocol not used for over 500 years. It shouldn't have existed, and yet the message was clear. To the blood of the Makers, your legacy waits. The crew, made of various species trained in xenohistory, debated whether it was a trap, but Elric knew the human past better than most. He wasn't just a captain, he was one of the few born from an old Earth colony before the diaspora. And his ancestors had fought in the last days of humanity's rise. Something about the signal felt personal. They landed in the ruins of a blackened facility buried beneath the planet's rust-colored desert, its walls still humming with buried energy. The air was thin but breathable, and though the place had long since crumbled, its core structure remained intact, as if waiting. As they explored, strange symbols etched into the walls pulsed faintly when Elric approached, glowing brighter in his presence but remaining dark when anyone else came near. Then, deep within the structure, they found the chamber, round, sealed, and untouched. The door recognized Elric's DNA the moment he placed his hand against it, and without a sound, it slid open to reveal a room filled with stasis pods, all empty except one. Inside floated a human child, eyes closed, no older than 10, suspended in perfect stillness. Systems surrounding the pod flickered to life, screens flashing ancient Terran script that translated as Project Legacy, Phase 1, awaiting activation. Elric's breath caught. He turned to the others, but they were already backing away, sensing something they could not understand. A small terminal blinked beside the pod, waiting for a command, and without thinking, Elric placed his hand on it. In a flash, his mind was filled with images, cities that reached the sky, humans glowing with strange energy, wars fought in silence using thought alone. He saw the fall, not from defeat, but from fear, fear of what humanity was becoming. The final leaders had taken a different path, choosing not extinction, but dormancy. They had hidden their most gifted children across time and space, sealed in protected chambers, each one carrying the knowledge, instincts, and evolution of a species that had walked too close to godhood. Elric was not just a captain. He was a failsafe, a descendant of those meant to awaken the legacy when the time was right. His bloodline had been altered across generations, hiding the key within memory, waiting for instinct to pull him back to this forgotten world. The child in the pod was not a survivor. He was the beginning. As the pod slowly opened, the air in the room shifted. The child opened his eyes, not with confusion, but with focus, as if he had merely blinked. His gaze locked on Elric's, and without words, a connection formed. The boy smiled faintly, then whispered, "You heard the call." Suddenly, the ground shook, and the facility's power surged. Ancient satellites in orbit came online, broadcasting encrypted messages into deep space, waking systems buried on other dead planets. This wasn't just one project. It was a network, and Elric had triggered it. His crew panicked, calling for evacuation, but Elric stood firm. He knew this wasn't the end. It was the return of something the galaxy had forgotten: humanity's second rise. As they escaped the collapsing facility, the child remained calm, silent, and observant, as if measuring the universe with every blink. On board the ship, he began to speak, not like a boy, but like a being who had lived through thousands of simulations, who carried within him the thoughts of an entire generation of enhanced minds. He told them the truth. Earth had never fallen. It had transcended, choosing to vanish from history so its enemies would lower their guard. The remaining humans had seeded the stars with echoes, genetic keys, hidden vaults, and now the awakening had begun. The child was not alone. There were others, waiting, scattered across forgotten systems, each one carrying a piece of the legacy, and Elric's presence meant the time had come to gather them. The crew watched as their human captain, who had always seemed ordinary, now stood at the center of something greater, something terrifying. The galactic powers, long since grown arrogant, had forgotten what humans truly were. But they would remember, because the legacy was no longer a secret. It was alive, awake, and moving. Elric gave a simple order: plot a course to the next signal. The stars stretched ahead of them, and in the silence of space, the pulse of an ancient race began to echo once more. Not with weapons, not with fleets, but with memory, blood, and the quiet certainty that humanity always returns, and never the same.